All right, we have some breaking news in the NFL where the Tennessee Titans are set to name Mike Borgonzi as their new general manager. That is the very latest from our NFL insider, Jonathan Jones. Borgonzi has been in the Chiefs organization since 2009, being a part of 3 Super Bowl runs there. He's been the assistant GM under Deej starting in 2021, and he's going to have a huge decision to make right off the bat with the Titans owning the #1 overall pick in the upcoming draft. Let's welcome in our lead NFL insider, Jonathan Jones. JJ, let's start things off. Mike Borgonzi, why him for this role?
Yeah, he's been one of the top candidates the last couple of years. You noted his resume and experience there. He's been with the Chiefs for close to 2 decades now, and he has kind of come up under a number of general managers. When you go from Scott Pioli to John Dorsey, now with Brett Veach, and of course Andy Reid, he's seen so much of it there. He was a finalist in Washington with the Commanders for their GM job last year that went to Adam Peters. He goes back to Kansas City. Oh, he just wins another Super Bowl, of course. And then this year, a hot name where he interviewed with the Jets. I would like to believe that he actually would have gotten a second interview with the Jets. I did not hear if he ultimately got an interview with the Las Vegas Raiders, the other team with an opening. But clearly, he was an impressive candidate an interview in Nashville, where he interviewed virtually last week, and then they brought him in person to meet with the president of football operations, Chad Brinker, with the owner, Amy Adams-Strunk, and President Burke Nihill, and that is where he ultimately won the job on Wednesday. The Titans spent some of this afternoon calling around to the other candidates, letting them know that they were out. And, of course, making the call to Mike Borgonzi, telling him that he's in. Now they just have to work out and hammer out a contract. There shouldn't be any bumps in the road. He should ultimately become the general manager of the Tennessee Titans.
And JJ, of course, when we're thinking about the Tennessee Titans, we're all, our head is on Will Levis. What are they going to do with that #1 overall pick? It certainly feels more and more like a quarterback. So that's obviously one of the first orders of business. But what other changes are you anticipating for him to make there right out of the gate?
Yeah, great question. They have the #1 overall pick, and so you can go ahead and imagine it will be a quarterback. They're going to have Will Levis in the fold in 2025. If Will Levis is the week 1 starter, something's probably gone wrong in the offseason and in training camp. There's a number of things that Mike Borgonzi is now tasked with doing. I think that we're going to see a little bit of a reimagining of the front office. It's an interesting and unique look that they have there in Tennessee. Chad Brinker, again, the president of football operations. He reports up to Amy Adams-Strunk, and the GM reports into Brinker, but the GM is still doing GM-like duties. So whether he has control of the 53-man roster or Brinker does, he's the guy who is bringing in the players. And Chad Brinker, of course, is going to have some veto power over that if he needs to. What else is he going to do? I could see an assistant general manager being brought on. I would not at all be surprised if a veteran AGM is brought in, someone who has been around the block a little bit, because this is now Brinker's 2nd year in this role as president of football operations. This is, of course, Borgonzi's 1st time as the general manager. So I would anticipate the Tennessee Titans bring in some experience into that front office. And then lastly, how are they going to operate in the draft and free agency? They're not going to go spending willy-nilly, and they are going to draft and develop there in Tennessee. When you consider Brinker's background coming from Green Bay, that's the motto there. When you consider Borgonzi, a place in Kansas City where there's not a lot of financial resources there, they're going to make sure they make do with what they have this year and moving forward. They have a big hole to climb out of, because in years past, this is a franchise over a number of different regimes that has not drafted well. They have missed on a lot of top 100 picks dating back 5-6 years up until, honestly, this season. So there's a lot to get done in Nashville, but they believe they have the group there that can do it, hiring Mike Borgonzi as GM.
All right, JJ, we certainly appreciate it joining us here. There's a lot of question marks as to what they're going to do there in Tennessee, but step 1, they are close to naming a new GM in Mike Borgonzi. Thanks so much, JJ. We appreciate it. And speaking of the Titans and what they're going to do with that #1 overall pick, here's how our draft expert Ryan Wilson sees it shaking out 1 through 10. He has them going the quarterback route, taking Cam Ward #1 overall as their new quarterback of the future. So let's bring in Ryan Wilson to talk more about this. And Ryan, before we get into, the potential and if they take the Shedeur or Cam Ward route, we were just talking with JJ. This is a guy, Mike Borgonzi, who was in the running last year for the Commanders. How much more pressure do you think he's under, seeing how the Commanders were able to successfully turn things around with Jaden Daniels? They're, in the divisional round now. How much more added pressure is that for a first-time GM who is now picking #1 overall? Not in the exact same situation, but kind of where you're looking at a quarterback and looking to turn things around very quickly.
That's a great point, Jacqueline, and that's something that the ownership probably pointed to during the interview, saying, hey, look, if they can do it, why can't we? We're in a division that isn't quite as competitive, honestly, as the NFC East. And the thing that happened is this. Adam Peters, of course, got that job from San Francisco to be the Commanders' GM. They hired Dan Quinn, so they had the right head coach in place. Brian Callahan's coming back for year 2 in Tennessee. But they absolutely crushed it in the draft. You talked about Jaden Daniels, but they got Johnny Newton, the interior defensive lineman, in the second round. They got Mikey Sanders still on day 2, the nickelback out of Michigan. They drafted their left tackle, Coleman, who played a bunch as a rookie. That left tackle position was wide open and one of the concerns headed into this season. So up and down the roster through the draft, they got a lot better. And then the infrastructure that came with Adam Peters and Dan Quinn, and of course owner Josh Harris, made it work, and made it work a lot faster than anyone expected. So the expectations should be high in Tennessee. They were high already. We thought we'd see more from Will Levis. That didn't happen. And that division is wide open. The Jaguars, weren't very good last year. C.J. Stroud and the Texans were sort of up and down. They looked great last week in the playoffs, but the regular season left a lot of questions. In Indianapolis, no one knows what the quarterback situation is going to be there long term either. So I think there should be a lot of pressure going in, perhaps similar to what Washington had, for the very reasons that Washington had that success during the 2024 season.
Yeah, and certainly the expectations are higher when the division is a little bit more winnable than others. So Ryan, in your mock draft that we pulled up, it was Cam Ward in the latest mock, but ultimately, what do you think they should do with that #1 spot? Why Cam Ward over Shedeur? Just kind of explain your reasoning there and which way they should ultimately go when it comes to the quarterback position and that #1 overall pick.
Yeah, Jacqueline, I wouldn't get cute. I would take a quarterback, because you can make all the excuses you want about taking someone that's not a quarterback. They need help along the offensive line in Tennessee. They've drafted a tackle and a guard the last 2 drafts in the first round, and they've been good. But if you don't have a quarterback, you don't have anything. And Will Levis, the second-round pick from a few years ago, got benched with a month ago in the season for Mason Rudolph. Meanwhile, Cam Ward, who's my QB1 by a hair over Shedeur Sanders, was electric this season for the U. And he transferred from Washington State. And when you talk to people at Washington State and at the U, they say the same thing. He's not a rah-rah guy. He's not going to get in your face guy, but he is a fantastic leader, and his teammates rally around him, in part because he plays at such a high level. One of the issues coming into the season, when you talk to scouts who had him as a day 2, perhaps day 3 guy, they wanted to see him play on time, get through his reads more, and be more like an NFL quarterback in that sense. And he's done those things. There's a lot of hero ball. He can play out of structure and make plays on the run like few people can, but you have to be able to play on time. And we saw Jaden Daniels do that with a lot of success early. Meanwhile, we saw Caleb Williams struggle with that in Chicago. He figured it out as the season went on, but it wasn't like he could just step on the field in the NFL and it suddenly clicked for him, in part because he was so used to having to do everything at USC. Similar situation with Cam Ward at the U, but he got better as the season went on. And I think the physical gifts, his mentality, and his ability to ball out is what's going to make him QB1, and something that the Tennessee Titans should consider very seriously.
Now, Ryan, we've had this conversation before about the Titans. Should they go the quarterback route? Should they, trade down and get a little bit of a haul? Because there are a handful of teams right there in the top 5, beside the Jags, that could really use a quarterback. How much does having a new GM and that pressure that we talked about, in your opinion, have them leaning towards going the quarterback route, even if this class is not necessarily as strong as others that we've seen in the past?
And that's right. And those are the conversations they had during the hiring process. What are your plans, Mr. GM, if we hire you, in terms of the quarterback situation? What do you think of the quarterbacks we have on the roster? What do you think of the quarterbacks in this draft class? And then you go from there. And look, Mike Tomlin, I know you're a Mike Tomlin fan. I'm a Mike Tomlin fan. But he is probably the only person on planet Earth who wins more than he loses. And Steelers fans want to fire him because he doesn't win in the playoffs. And that's because they don't have a quarterback. Mike Tomlin is a fantastic coach, but if you do not have a quarterback, you are not going to go to the playoffs, and if you get to the playoffs, you're not going to go very far. So if that means you have to draft a quarterback every year, then you probably should draft a quarterback every year until you get it right, because you cannot be in a situation where you're Myles Garrett, for example. It didn't work out, obviously, with Deshaun Watson in Cleveland, but Myles Garrett made it clear, I want to know what the plans are in Cleveland before I sign up for more of this, because I'm burning Hall of Fame years on some pretty mediocre football. And I think that's what Cam Ward gives you. That's what Shedeur Sanders gives you. It gives you hope, because Travis Hunter, he's the best player in this draft class, and I don't even know if it's close. The thing is, unfortunately, he does not play quarterback. So if you take him if you're the Tennessee Titans, or if you take him if you're the Cleveland Browns or New York Giants, that's great. But he's not going to be able to win you games in the fourth quarter when you're down by 3 and you need a score. So that's the concern, Jacqueline, when you're these teams picking at the top, and they're picking at the top historically year in and year out, because you don't get the quarterback position right. Cam Ward, is he QB1 in last year's draft class? No, he's not. But guess what? He's in this year's draft class, and he is QB1. And if the Titans don't take him because they trade down and stockpile a bunch of picks, or they sign Sam Darnold, we'll see how it works out. But I think the easy solution is draft a quarterback, figure everything else later.
Yeah, we can't forget Cam Ward declared for the draft last season. He was like a day 3 guy, and then his draft stock ultimately boosted after getting an extra year and a whole lot of money there at Miami. Ryan Wilson, we certainly appreciate it. Talking about the Tennessee Titans and what they should do with that #1 overall pick now that they have a new GM that they are set to hire. And you can hear more from Ryan Wilson alongside Rick Spielman on their With the First Pick podcast. You can download, follow, listen wherever you get your pods, or you can watch right now by scanning that QR code.